Hello, manager. I have something to tell you.
I quit, loser!
See you when I'm a millionaire,
Sucker!
The starving artist archetype is universally understood. That guy or gal who toils away at their craft for years on end, getting no recognition until boom, everybody finally discovers their brilliance and they're lauded with all of the accolades and money they've always dreamt of. As a creative, this drastic work ethic is almost seen as a rite of passage for any aspiring artist. I mean, if they can handle living off Doritos for daily sustenance, why can't you big baby? But this notion of believing you need to sacrifice everything, your stability, health, and friendships, in order to achieve success in your craft isn't the only path to greatness. And I actually think in the long run, another method will benefit you better. But regardless of how you get to your goals, you'll have to choose your sacrifices. Now, after I graduated from film school, I moved back up to the north of England to live back with my mum. I was living about an hour away from the nearest big city, Manchester, and my ideal scenario would have been to move to the big city, start knocking on the doors of production companies and landing myself a job working in the industry. Problem was, I didn't have a lot of money at the time, and rent in a big city like Manchester was nearly impossible to afford unless I had some kind of consistent income coming in. So at that moment, I had a choice. Do I find a Starbucks job working for minimum wage to get the money I needed to pay for my rent, with the remaining time dedicated to solely networking and finding work within the industry? Or do I stay at home with my mum, save money, but basically have unlimited time to knock on doors in the city to look for work? I ended up choosing the latter. Now, both options had sacrifices. Being at home meant that I lost my independence and had to go by somebody else's rules. My mum wasn't some kind of wicked controlling lady, but it's not like she was gonna let me redecorate the living room with Roger Deakins wallpaper anytime soon. And if I wanted to get into the big city, that was a 2-hour round trip via train. But if I had chosen the former option and lived in the city, I'd be right in the thick of the action, but with my free time massively impacted by all of the latte, maca, frappuccino thingies that I'd be pouring for hours on end. In hindsight, I would love to have experienced the path of living in the city to see how my experience and memories would have been different. But the sacrifice of living back at home so I could have 100% freedom to take on those last minute shoots that I would have had to otherwise reject because I had a Starbucks shift in order to pay for my rent seemed like a worthy sacrifice at the time. I don't really have any regrets per se, because everything happened the way it was supposed to. But if I could go back, I'd actually find a more permanent job at a video production company. So I could have lived in the city, getting a stable income, doing something that is actually giving me skills in the discipline that I already want to be in. Then with my spare time, I'd be working on film projects of my own and, of course, pestering my production company to let me borrow their gear for my own shoots. Even though I had 100% free time at home, I do feel like I wasn't using it as effectively as I perhaps could have. Maybe having less available time by not living at home would have meant that I'd actually better value those smaller gaps of free time when I wasn't working a day job to pay the rent. I love what the author Sean Wes says about day jobs in his book Overlap. The purpose of the day job is to support the exploration and pursuit of your passion, to grow your passion organically without compromise, and to get your passion to the point where you can make a living from it. The day job is supposed to pay your bills and cover your expenses. That's it. It's not supposed to be a place where you partially indulge your passion in compromised conditions. It's hard to imagine that having a job in the discipline you actually love can cause you to develop a dislike for it, which is why sometimes you have to be careful with the job that brings in your money, because monetizing your passion can cause you to hate your passion. What do Ed Sheeran and Jim Carrey have in common? They both share the same side hobby of painting, but why? Maybe they just like it, but I think there's actually a deeper reason to why they do this hobby. Despite the fact that they're hugely successful doing the crafts that they're passionate about, they still need a creative outlet that isn't at all connected to an extrinsic factor. When the thing that you used to do just for fun becomes the thing that sustains you financially, it ultimately affects your relationship with it. Researchers have found that when extrinsic motivation, such as money and prizes, is given for actions that people already find intrinsically rewarding, they become less internally motivated to pursue those activities in the future. With the theory being that people tend to pay more attention to external rewards rather than their enjoyment of the activity. As a result, they think that their participation in the activity is the result of the external reward instead of being due to their internal appreciation of the behavior. Now, I think that there's many layers to this theory. The issues that a famous musician like Ed Sheeran will face by being successful in his craft, being chased around by adoring fans everywhere that he goes, are a lot different than the successes of an unknown editor who's working with a big YouTuber. But regardless, when you principally rely on your passion to fund your everyday life, your relationship with it is going to be, in a sense, tainted by the fact that your previous enjoyment for this action is now mixed in with with the money you receive from doing it. I've personally come into contact with this paradox as a freelance filmmaker, editing content for someone else versus for my own YouTube channel when I'm fully in control of the final output. It does have a different impact on my motivation and enjoyment. Arguably, I'll procrastinate less when money's on the table because I effectively have a boss / someone who is relying on me for the finished product by a certain deadline. But when I'm my own boss on my own project, I tend to experiment and play around more with the possibilities for what I can do with an edit to create a more interesting and engaging video. I'm still not going to bash this method of work too much. I'd much rather be getting paid to do a job in a field that I already like, such as video editing, versus working in a pie factory for 10 hours a day. And if you can learn skills and gain resources, access to software, etc., while getting paid for it, that sounds like one hell of a deal to me for the sacrifice of perhaps not feeling quite as motivated or creative as you could be. All of the above is why if you just go out and quit your day job to follow your passion, you're gonna elevate those extrinsic reasons for why you're doing your passion even more, especially if you haven't even started to make any money in this area yet. A better method might be to get a job in a related field and use your free time to build up your side hustle to a point where it can sustain you immediately instead of sometime in the future when you finally get the success to make that a reality. As Noah Kagan says, once you've validated an idea and you're pulling in enough money to cover your minimum monthly expenses, then you can quit. Another big issue with this whole monetizing your passion by using your day job as the backbone for it is that you're going to start to make compromises that will potentially lead you to doing tasks that'll drain you rather than energize you. I experienced this with filmmaking where initially I loved working on sets for hours and hours, helping to make projects come to life. But during the periods of my freelance career when my money was low, I would just say yes to any job, regardless of the kind of shoot that it was. Doing an overnight shoot in the woods for 16 hours straight? Yes, please. 2 shoots back to back, with the next one being so early in the morning, I could only sleep for 3 hours before I arrive on set. Yeah, I'll take that. Add these instances up for a long enough time, and my initial enjoyment for getting on sets gradually started to disappear, and that pie factory position, in terms of the fun of it, started to feel somewhat similar to what I was currently doing. No offense to people who actually work in pie factories. Greggs is the GOAT of the UK fast food chain. But the compromises that I was doing because money became my primary driving goal around a career path that was once all about passion began to take its toll on my satisfaction of even doing the thing. And this eventually led me to seeking out other areas in film production that didn't involve me having to physically be on set in like 1 degrees of cold, wind, and horrible rain, aka making and editing YouTube content for other YouTubers. If you don't or can't have any kind of autonomy in your work because you have to say yes to everything because money, then that's a surefire way to poison what was once something you used to do for the joy of doing it alone. The author Cal Newport talks about the factors that make up a desirable and sustainable career path. The 3 key ones include autonomy, which is allowing you to have control over your life and schedule; creativity, so a job being creative and letting you kind of use your creative muscle to make decisions and make choices that impact the job. And speaking of impact, for the job to actually be impactful overall. Finding a job that has all 3 of these things is super hard, hence why most people don't have one. But keeping on the lookout for when any of these elements are beginning to get compromised will help to improve your awareness for when you perhaps need to find new ways to alleviate money becoming a heavy factor in dictating the choices you're making when undertaking your craft. And if you've tried everything you can to make your work more fun and energizing and it's still not working, then perhaps it might be time to quit. It's such a hard thing to walk away from something that brings a lot of good to your life, but ultimately takes more away in the long run. And that's because quitting is itself a skill and one that you can improve upon with time and experience. Stephen Bartlett's quitting framework is one of the best formulas out there for when you should quit. But there's an additional element that I'd add into this framework, and that's to do with luck. I know it's popular to profess that you make your own luck and anything that you put your mind to, you can achieve. While I do agree with the sentiment behind, philosophies and statements like this, I do, however, believe that luck can directly impact your ability to handle the long-term challenges and dealing with the suck period of your side hustle. Picture this: if you were doing something like starting a YouTube channel completely from scratch, putting out a brand new video each week, with each video getting a total of 2 views, and you were doing this for 2 years consistently, and then by only your 2nd year, you started to see that jump up from 2 views to 4 views a video. Amazing, double the viewership. How long could you actually keep that up for? Just for the record, it's very unlikely that you'd be getting a view count this low if you were consistently uploading videos for 2 years, unless you were literally filming with the camera pointing directly under your nostrils for each upload. But there are some people who would say that if you are really passionate about the act of making YouTube videos, you'd be able to keep up with this indefinitely, and it would have no impact on your motivation or passion or enjoyment of making videos, even if you have just 2 viewers. But I don't think for most people motivation works this way. Even if you're good at something, if you can see no signs or very little signs that what you're doing can potentially turn into something successful, or you're not receiving any encouragement of people saying that you're actually good at what you're doing, then unless you're the most self-confident, driven person in the world, that's gonna have some kind of negative effect on your self-worth and motivation to keep it up for the long run. Now let's imagine that same scenario, but after 2 years of consistent regular uploads, you now have a regular viewer base of 10,000 people tuning in to watch every single one of your new uploads. How likely are you to keep up with this for another 2 years now, when you can clearly remember what it was like to start with those 2 very dedicated, lovely viewers and how far you've come since then? Lucky breaks matter, and for some of us, they come sooner rather than a lot later. Yes, you could toil away at your dream of becoming that famous musician, but at some point when the lucky break hasn't shown up yet, you're gonna start to crave some level of stability because of all the things that you've since sacrificed trying to get to your dream. This is of course a lot easier to do when you're young, and staying back at home with your parents is a no-brainer after all of your money has run dry from your passion not kicking off. But once you get older and your friend circles start to change up with people getting married, having long-term stable careers, you're not going to be able to block out the noise of self-doubt within you about whether you can realistically sustain this grind for another 10 years. But the musician that's already got that break and is loving life, on tour, playing to adoring fans across the globe, that initial challenge in the early days was totally worth it for the life that they now have. But would they have actually kept going for another 5, 10, 20 years if that luck didn't come to them when it did? You're not weak for giving up or adjusting your direction, desires, and goals in life. And if anything, the new path that your lack of luck will put you on could actually teach you things and shape you as a person in ways that you, looking back, won't be able to imagine living life not having those experiences. I genuinely feel if I'd gotten a big break as a cinematographer and I was now, out there shooting massive music videos for people like Billie Eilish and Dua Lipa, I'd be totally content with my life. But in a way, my lack of luck and impatience to stick it out to see if that luck would ever arrive led me to realizing that working for content creators and making my own content is actually the path that I want to be exploring for the long run. Sometimes not being lucky will lead you to a more fulfilling and ultimately healthier life. As Sean West says, there's no direct path to success. It will take you time to discover what gives you fulfillment. What you'll end up enjoying the most in life is likely several steps from now. Remember that the only thing keeping you from getting there is doing the next imperfect thing. Now you've actually got better mindsets for how you're gonna go about and explore and actually do your passions. You should also check out this video here where I go through the 5 really bad creativity habits that you should avoid. Hit that subscribe button, because if you don't, I'm gonna get you that job at Greg's, tasting all of those pies and making sure that they're delicious and ready for the customers. To be fair, that actually doesn't sound too bad of a job. See you in the next video.